Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're back. You with me today. Thank you for keeping me company. This is Rashida Khan on the Mid Morning Talk Show. And moving on to our next guest. Before that, though, I mustn't forget to do my housekeeping. Yes, please get in touch with us on our WhatsApp line 061 766 That's 061 766 Please send through your comments and questions for our guests. You can also get in touch with us on X. That's at Salam Media, all one word. But if I almost forgot about that, the important part of the business side of things, because I'm so excited to have my dear friend Debbie Cockrell. So before I introduce you, let me just tell you a little bit about this wonderful woman that I'm so proud to call my friend. Debbie Cockrell is a self confessed polymath who was born and raised in Johannesburg in a community called Bosmont on the South or West Rand. After completing high school, she went on to study in the hospitality, food, and beverage industry. And this career choice facilitated 10 wonderful years of travel, working locally and internationally in multiple sectors in the hospitality sector. She's worked on cruise ships, ski resorts in the Republic of Ireland, in Lesotho, Cape Town, just about everywhere. After that sojourn with traveling, she came back to settle, and as they say, the roosters come home to the chickens come home to roost. Debbie joined her mum, who had started an NPO called the Slovo Center of Excellence, where she's currently director. Along the way, she's morphed into the educational sector as well, through toy libraries that offer resource support to her community, engaging play-based learning and resource support to ECDs, that's early childhood centers, and other facilities such as after-school care programs. And she's quite knowledgeable in this area and serves as a consultant in this area of expertise. She's also developed her personal brand as a social entrepreneur, focusing on educational support across various fields, including environmental advocacy, toy libraries, of course, and micro business. She's a founding member of Community Green Projects, another NPC, which is a community led initiative in the communications and operations portfolio for environmental advocacy. Oh, that's a mouthful. We're going to have to talk a lot about all of that. You're going to have to explain all that to us. But the CV continues. She currently sits as the chairperson for the Toy Library Association of South Africa, that's TLASA, TLASA, advocating for play-based learning on a national scale with toy libraries across the country, and runs several micro businesses towards sustainability in her personal capacity. And on a personal note, her passions include travel, food, photography, music, the arts, and cultural experiences. And I know for a fact she also likes to laugh. So that's a wonderful thing. Her other areas of involvement include youth mentorship, alternative wellness with indigenous materials, and connecting people to reach their full potential through collaboration and partnership opportunities. And I know for a fact that she's very, very passionate about that. Hello, Debbie, and welcome to the show.
Greetings, and salam, Rashida, and all the Salam Media listeners and viewers. It's
Mhm.
absolutely a pleasure to be here today, and thank you for that very long introduction. You're even making me blush while I sit here, but really just a privilege just to share the afternoon with you and talk about something that is very, very close to my heart, and hopefully we can play a little role in all the listeners listening today and just exposing the conversation around sustainability and what that means at community level. Fantastic. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think these are very, very important conversations, and a lot of people are just not aware of the work that's happening or how they can get involved. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So, as the director of Slovo Center of Excellence that does such incredible work in your community, well done. Can you tell us a little bit about the center and how it's making a difference in the community?
All right. So the organization was started by my mom, Lorraine, 20 years ago. This
Mm-hmm.
last February, we've just celebrated 20 years in existence. And it originally started as a Sunday school program working with children. My mom had sort of winding down. She was in the empty nest phase. My siblings and I were all traveling the world. And she wanted to do her little bit to give back. Back in 2004, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
2004, 2005. And she basically started off, and that eventually developed into an after school care program, which then developed from 20 to 30 children into about 150 children. And
Wow.
she was looking for a tool that she could use to help the children in the educational journey, because that's where she saw the need. And the organization at that point was based in an informal settlement called
Mm-hmm.
Slovo, which is in the Coronationville, Crosby area, about 10 minutes from where we live in Bosmont. And that's where she felt her calling at that point, to give back, to make her little difference to the world. And it then has developed over the last 20 years. I joined her in 2014, and we now sit at a very, very different position than we did originally, where we don't even have a building of our own. We do not have a center at present. And
Mm.
what we've done in terms of keeping our programs going is we've looked for like-minded partners, like-minded organizations within our community where we could add value to people working with children. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really been what has sustained us as an organization through partnership and collaboration.
I think partnerships and collaborations are critically important. I mean, I always say to people, don't think of one plus one equaling two. One plus one actually can give you 11. So if
Absolutely.
everybody, if you pool people's skills and resources, you can get so much more value out of that. So well done to you guys. I love the fact that even though the Slovo Park is considered, an informal community, and there's so many challenges there. I love the fact that you guys decided to call your center Slovo Center of Excellence. I feel it's very, very important that we put it out there, that we put whatever we want out there. And in spite of the challenges that you faced over the years, I know you faced many challenges. You've always found a way to deal with that. And it is because of collaboration and partnerships. And I also find that when you're working in community and you're working with people on the grassroots levels, invariably it's never just, this is my job, this is what I'm here to do, and that's it, it's done and over, done and dusted, and I go. It has a life of its own. And I imagine that's probably one of the reasons why you started Community Green. I just want to explain to the readers how you spell Community Green. It's so cute. So it's got COMM, there's a hyphen, and unity is in capital letters. So again, that name already starts putting pictures in my mind about the importance of what you can do and the kind of impact you're having. So as a founding member of the Community Green Project, which focuses on environmental advocacy, and that is something I would like you to explain a little bit for our readers. What inspired this particular initiative, and how are you engaging with the community to take action for a greener future?
Thanks so much again for that, Rashida. So this is such an important conversation for every single human being on the planet. It's by
Mm-hmm.
no means just for one community or one region or one country. And the organization was started by ordinary residents. We got together, gathered ourselves under a tree in the community on one of our sports fields, and started to look around and say, what are we going to do about the current state of things? And that was
Mm-hmm.
really coming out of COVID around 2021. And we were starting to see a lot of degradation, a lot of illegal dumping, just this absolute neglect that had come out of the COVID space, obviously
Mm-hmm.
linked to many other issues at that particular time. And we gathered ourselves, came up with a bit of a plan, and started to formalize what it is we wanted to focus on. And this was quite a difficult decision because environmental advocacy is quite a broad topic. And we really wanted to hone in on things that made sense for us in our community.
Mm-hmm.
So things like waste management were really important. We've got a Bosman Spruit wetlands issue, which is a 30-year project. Many community members have been working at to try and have that restored. That completely destroys our recreational facilities because of
Mm-hmm.
the multiple complex issues linked into that area. We looked at education and awareness as a pivotal conversation. We're not seeing that happening in our homes. We're not seeing that happening in our schools. And you see
Mm,
that by the state of the neglect where children are occupied. So whether it be a school grounds, whether it be an area where they get their public transport at a taxi or a bus, where children walk, there is just litter everywhere. So we started to realize that there's a whole combination of elements. And then maybe the one last one I'd like to highlight is the importance of food security. Once again, coming out of the COVID period, one of the biggest issues we found across the country, across the world, was the long lines at the feeding schemes and the
mm,
churches and the mosques and the community centers. And that was because people had no way to feed themselves once they
mm,
had either been put on hold for work or couldn't attend their normal day to day sort of activities. And so, food security is a huge component around environmental awareness because
mm,
there's a component there that speaks to, are we educating ourselves? Are we educating our families, our children? Are we passing down knowledge that has been there for many, many generations around how we can feed our families? And that
mm,
really is a real broad stroke of what Community Green Projects is all about at a very, very sort of high level. There's many,
mm.
many more things, but we can chat about that as the afternoon continues.
Absolutely. No, we have to touch on so many different things that you do. You know, you wear many hats, and the one that I particularly am interested in, of course, is the Toy Library Association of South Africa, that you're the chairperson of. So you're a strong advocate for play-based learning. And in fact, I think that even extends further. Apart from just play based learning, you also get play based therapy, which is so much more, which means it's just so play based to actually work with children in that kind of space where they are able to use play as a tool to be able to express themselves, to be able to learn from. Why is it so important? Why is play so important for children's development? And how how can toy libraries help bridge gaps in early childhood education?
All right, thank you so much again, Rashida. I can talk about this topic for days,
I
and
know.
unfortunately, we have a very short amount of time. But just really to highlight that play is a fundamental human right for children. I want to highlight that
Mm,
going into tomorrow's Human Rights Day. I think it's important
mhm,
that we acknowledge and understand just how vital it is for children's well being, physically, mentally, emotionally. All of those elements are combined within the play based learning context. As the Toy Library Association of South Africa, our key role is to find opportunities to bring toy librarians together, to
mhm,
create advocacy opportunities for toy libraries, exactly like what we're doing right now. And then, of course, to build a community of toy librarians and play based advocates or play based ambassadors, play based facilitators and specialists, people that are really involved in play with children. So,
mhm,
just to maybe touch on what you had mentioned in the description earlier, I think what's very important to realize is when we look at the play based therapy component, that's your professions such as your occupational therapists, your speech therapists, your
mhm,
counselors, all of
mhm,
those really sort of medical type professions where people have gone to study at university and people have taken on that knowledge from a very academic perspective and then bring it into their work when it comes to working with traumatized children or working with children that are suffering from various types of ailments or human conditions. The
mhm,
other side, which is the area that I'm more focused on, is how do we take simple, everyday opportunities, everyday resources, and convert those into moments and opportunities to play with children. And to really break that down is to understand that play is the language that children learn in. As
yes.
adults, we are sort of aware of the word language from a very boxed perspective. So you speak this language based on where you're from, based on where you're
Mhm,
raised, based on your
mhm,
family heritage. But when you take a moment and observe children, you can put 10 children into a circle on a piece of grass,
mhm,
and you can put a couple of toys with them or pack of Lego or whatever it is that you want to provide them to play with. Those children can be from completely different backgrounds and they will play together. They will
Yes.
communicate with each other. They'll
Yes.
communicate through hand signals. They'll communicate through tone of voice, maybe even look of the eye, maybe even a hug sometimes, maybe even an angry little bit of a tug sometimes. But
Mm-hmm.
in most cases, children can get along quite fine, even if they do not speak the same language. And that's where we bring in that context that plays the language that children actually learn in the world, how they engage the environment. And by the environment, I'm talking about more than the trees and the plants. I'm talking about their home life. I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about what they see around their community. If they see a well-kept community, and that is part of their everyday life, and they can take the dog for a walk and go play in the public park, that
Mm-hmm.
becomes part of the environment. If, on the other hand, which is what we find in most of our communities across South Africa, where there's a lot of neglect, a lot of unsafe spaces for children, a lot of actually violence in communities, that children are not
Mm-hmm.
safe to play outside anymore, this becomes an even bigger conversation. So we start to recognize that the importance of play is not only important outside in outdoor spaces, but then how do we foster that within the home? Added into that, how do we take the conversation forward with the age of technology where children are stuck in front of a flat computer screen for hours on end? That does not serve them well for their social development. It doesn't serve them well for their brain development. And that really is where the fundamental issues start to arise later on.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is something that I'm also very fascinated about because as a mother, when you're raising kids, you worry about the amount of screen time. And I remember many years ago, I mean, my kids are in their 20s now, but when they were much younger and I was trying to find out about it, and I even remember seeing some research about how being on the phone as opposed to on the screen all the time does not develop like certain short term memory things which kids need to do at a young age, whereas playing physical play, that kind of thing actually does stimulate certain things. So it's so important. And I often think, I wish that play was just across the board and that all, even adults, remembered how to play
We
and
need to do
spend
that
some
more.
time. Yeah, we need to
We
do that more.
absolutely
Yeah,
we
to have
absolutely
fun.
advocate for youth play, adult
Mhm,
play, elderly play, senior citizens. That cross
mhm.
generational play is so important.
Yeah.
We've got a component within the play-based learning sector through CLASA that we refer to as Indigenous games. And
Mm,
Indigenous games is every single one of us have had that experience as a child. We might
yes.
have a different name for it. We might have called it
Yes.
something different, but it's the stuff you were playing outdoors in the street, your grandmother, grandfather may have taught to you. So it's
Correct.
things like Moraba Raba or China
Mm,
rope or
mm,
blikkies or
mm,
Keniki.
mm,
Depending on which community you come from, it would have whatever particular connotation to it. So we've tried to sort of bring some of those components that can engage adults as well,
mm,
into going back into their childhood and rediscovering that inner child. When we look at days like Heritage Day in September, it's a
mm,
wonderful time to bring Indigenous games to the conversation.
mm, mhm,
All of those activities were absolutely built on learning skills in vocabulary, movement, mathematics skills, coordination, hand and eye coordination. Those are the fundamentals of playful learning and development. So they were embedded in Indigenous games, and we just didn't call them a form of education, but there's no doubt at all that they were.
that they were, I'm sure. Okay, moving on then. Thank you for that. So, Debbie, your work spans because you're so diverse and you're doing so many different things. It spans educational, environmental advocacy, micro business, all sorts of things. How do these different areas connect or intersect? And what role do you see for social entrepreneurship in creating sustainable change in communities? I know that's quite a loaded question, but if anyone can answer it, you, the polymath, can.
All right. If you can just guide me if I veer off a little and pull me back, but I'm gonna try and answer it as best as I can. And it is a loaded question, but it's a very
Mhm.
important question. I've been
Yes.
asked this question many, many times. Debbie, why are you doing so many things? Why are you
Mm,
on one
mm,
side with children and on the other side with the environment, and then on the other side you're working with micro businesses? And really the common thread in all of those is the word sustainable. or
Mm,
sustainability. And
mm.
it's become a very sort of catchphrase over the last couple of years. Not everybody's exposed to it. Those of us that are, we're already reaching the point of greenwashing, where things are just being called sustainable for the sake of it, with
Yes.
actually no actual value to the word sustainability. So coming back into it, when I started on my journey in the play-based learning toy library context with Slovo Center, I started to see the opportunity to use waste material to make learning resources for children. So that was a very sort of a learning process over a few years, my sort of early years, let's say
Mhm,
about 7, 8 years ago.
mhm.
And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And of course, it made sense because we've used coffee tins to play games and we've
Yes.
made balls out of, orange sacks. That was nothing new. So I think
Mhm.
what's very important in this conversation is the terminology may be different, the terminology
Yes.
may be new, but without a doubt, there are many organizations, many homes that have been doing this. We
Mhm.
just need to be mindful that we need to speed things up. We need to
Right.
increase the expansion of what we're doing, and we need to bring back the mindfulness about our purchasing power. And that for me is a fundamental issue around this entire conversation. Coming
Mhm.
into the environmental context, really it's about how do I take care of my environment? That absolutely starts when we're young. So you cannot
Right.
have engagements with children without telling them about care for the planet.
Yes.
In our work, we often distribute beautiful gifts or ice creams or packets of knickknacks or whatever it is that we can sort of, provide to children as a treat. Sometimes it's an apple or an orange. And within those little moments, there's an opportunity to teach a child
Mm.
not to litter.
Not
And
to
what we
litter.
see
Yes.
happening around, we see this. We go to shopping centers, we on the road in our car, we at a public event, and people just open up and throw it down on the floor without any context of what it
Mm.
is their mind is thinking around mindfulness. So
Mhm.
for me, the two go hand in hand. You've got to be able to bring children and environmental habits together.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
really where my journey started.
Yeah.
Within the hospitality sector that I worked in for 15 years, that was really the four leader for me in my journey around understanding sustainability, because the restaurant industry, the hotel industry, are at the forefront of a lot of the sustainable issues. We've heard of concepts like farm to table, where
Yes.
the using micro farmers to provide ingredients instead of buying from
Ingredients.
the huge, massive, macro type of
Mm.
suppliers, is to
Mhm.
support somebody who's growing gooseberries or support somebody who's growing mint. And
Mhm.
so you also generate, that sort of income model for local farmers and supporting local businesses.
Mm.
So, using you taking all of this experience and exposure that I've had over my career path is really to find myself in a community that I live in, that I've lived in my whole life. I've moved out to go and work and study and work abroad, but come back and been very sad to see what I see when it comes to the employment crisis. Now I'm
Mm.
going, well, we've got an employment crisis, we've got a food shortage, and we've got a lack of people interacting with children. Well, guess what? All three of those can work together.
I'm
So
sure.
through the
Yeah.
toy library, what we also do is we advocate for volunteerism through
Mhm.
community green projects. We advocate for volunteerism, and that's really putting your hand up and saying, "How can I help?" And how
Yes.
can I help is not always feeding someone. How can I
Mm.
help is how can I spend time for 2 hours playing with a child? How can I
Yes.
spend time with somebody for 2 hours or 30 minutes, engaging them about an interesting topic that I might be passionate about? Maybe I enjoy working in my garden. Maybe I have a fish tank at home. It could be
Yes.
anything.
Anything.
That for me is where we start to see the cross pollination
Yeah.
between education with children and environmental conversations. And then within that broader conversation is how do we start creating jobs for ourselves without being dependent on finding a job? And that's
Mm.
where the country really is. It's glaring us in the face. Our youth unemployment is at crisis levels.
Yeah,
And
we don't
I
want to.
don't only
Yeah.
see it as a youth employment issue. I also see it as the 35 to 50-year-old crisis issue. The first one
Yes.
to get laid off is the person that's in their 40s or possibly 50s, to make
Yes.
space for younger ideas and innovative ideas within an organization. But what we're sitting with there, even with our retired teachers, our retired accountants, our retired
Mm.
engineers, is we're sitting there with 40 years of wisdom and knowledge
Skills.
that
Absolutely.
absolutely needs to be shared. So we
Yes.
start to see that loop. For me, when we're talking about circular economy, we take all three of those components and you start to develop your circular economy. Sadly,
Okay.
what we see though is people don't understand the importance of giving of self. So that
Yeah.
becomes another behavior shift that we need to start inculcating in our homes, in our community organizations, and into society as a whole.
Yeah. And that in
I
itself
hope
is a
that answers your
it
your question.
definitely does. It definitely
Okay.
does. And I mean, for me, I always try and see the holistic picture, and I think you captured that very well for us. Thank you very much. And my next
Okay.
question was going to be about how we can get involved, but unfortunately, my producer is giving me all sorts of signals in the background, and we have to wrap up.
No
And for
problem.
always, I get to this point where I'm just getting into the crux of the conversation, and we have to wrap up. Thank you again for your time. It's
Thank
been
you.
wonderful
Thank you for
chatting to
having
you.
me.
I've learned so much. I'm sure our listeners have as well. I wish you all the best. And I'm sure if there's an opportunity, we'll have you back on the show. Thank you once
Please
again.
do.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Goodbye. And on that note, we're going to go for an ad break. Thank you, guys.